Fantastic. Okay, Joe, you're joining us. You're joining the Beer Farmers and the Many Hats Club BeerCon 1. Thank you so much. Um, I think you were one of my top picks for guests because of your involvement in Tripwire. And I have to say, your publication has given voice to a lot of information security professionals. Why don't you talk a little bit about your 2019 review? What are some of the special moments for Tripwire?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. It's been great kind of following along to see what's been going off. So yeah, excited to be here. So there's been, yeah, lots of great highlights this year from Tripwire. Like you say, I mean, one of the things I always try and do with having a place where we can have so much influence and people that can come and contribute, give people a voice in the community. And I think that's really important. So one of the things that have been really good over sort of the last 12 months is the work we've kind of been in with different B-sides organizations. So what we'll do is we'll proactively go out to all these B-sides, all the new ones, all the long-standing ones, and just get an email out to speakers just to see if they want to write a blog, get it on the Tripwire
Nice.
site, and then we can plug the actual event itself, which, for the ones in like San Francisco and Las Vegas and London and things like that, they get more than enough people there. But for some of the smaller conferences, it's actually been really useful. I think it's just another way of getting the name out there, just to make more people in the area know that this is happening. So that's been really good. And then from like a personal point of view, I would say that's how I get to meet so many great people in the industry. I mean,
Hmm.
there's so many different people I've met, and I would say a majority of them have been coming through the B-sides tracks, whether that's, a rookie track at London, or something that's more established at Las Vegas or San Francisco. So there's such a wide spectrum of people that have contributed. And I'd say that's definitely been one of the highlights.
That's great. And I think the community certainly appreciates that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, see, I tend to look at the Tripwire blog as being quite a bit independent from Tripwire, the company. Is there a sense that you get to kind of operate your own show within sort of certain parameters?
Yeah, exactly. Within certain parameters, definitely. I mean, with a corporate blog, you always have to be careful because potentially it doesn't matter who you're writing about or to, they could be a potential customer. So when a data breach happens, we have to be careful. But I think that actually gives you the almost gives you more credibility because we have to fact check everything. We can't just go, oh, by the way, this breach has happened because this researcher says it has. We actually have to get that verified within that organization. When they release when they have a press release go out or a statement, then we can maybe talk about it, which is fine. But yeah, going back to your point in terms of being independent, I think it's great that we have the ability to do that. And I think since I've been doing it for nearly 6 years now with Tripwire, I think that's kind of always been the strategy where you do get a lot of corporate blogs, and to be honest, they're pretty boring because everything has to talk about the product, everything has to lead back to a sales pitch, and there's always going to be an element of that in there somewhere because obviously you kind of have to justify your existence as a blog. Actually have the ability to pull people in from B-sides and talk about things like OPSEC, which is not really related to Tripwire as such, especially not their products or solutions. Obviously, it is to the wider community, but we can kind of talk about what we want as long as it relates back to security. And I think that just gives us a louder voice in the community.
I think there's also a really great sort of synergy because, say something bad happens at Tripwire. Well, you have a lot of friends in the community. You have a lot of people. You have a very positive relationship, I think, with the community. That would help when a company goes into to a crisis mode. I guess a rough day at work for any technology company is to be mentioned in the registrar, right?
Yeah.
Um, so a great PR strategy is we won't get we don't want to be in the registrar. How do you feel though when you've got a company, not your company, but you have a company that has made outlandish claims and wants your brand to support them? Do you get that a lot? I'm thinking about some of the controversies that we saw this year, like Crown Sterling, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, we try and stay away from that as much as possible, really. I think there's enough drama that goes on, and I don't think especially from a corporate perspective, we should really have an input in what goes on there, or even an opinion. If something is factual, then I have no issues with us talking about that. But I think when things are, there's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the industry generally. And I think as a vendor, because there's so many vendors out there, I think it is almost their responsibility to make sure they are neutral in a lot of these different discussions. So that's kind of my point and view on that.
Do you ever sort of advise the marketing team or the PR team at Tripwire, maybe other companies, about what not to do? Because I mean, you've been in the business for a while, and I'm thinking of the recent Patron exercise bike, kind of gross ad that was very negatively received by a very vocal group, caused a 10% drop in their stock market.
Yeah, and I think I'm really fortunate that being at Tripwire for so long now, I've learned a lot off a lot of great people as well. There's a really good team here. There was when I first joined, and there is now, and that has changed over the course. I mean, I'm in terms of like the marketing department, I'm probably one of the longest serving people there now.
Yeah.
But I just think the way we try and look at it is, you obviously, a lot of these companies, they want to take risks and they want to do things because then people actually speak about them. But when it comes to marketing, the best marketing you can do is in the quality of your products and your services, and that communication you give to your customers. So, to me, you don't need to do these publicity stunts and things like that. If you have a solid foundation, a solid base, it's almost like security in general, isn't it? Really, just get the basics right, do the foundational stuff, and honor your word, be good, be respectable, and then people pick up on that and they appreciate that, and then I think that goes a long way.
I think, yeah, and I think building that kind of goodwill. What would you say to somebody that's looking to, publish something in your publication? What are sort of some of the top tips that you would want to impart to young security bloggers, or not even young, but folks that want to blog or talk about an issue for the first time?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things to think about, really. I really like the art of storytelling. I think a lot of people write the same things over and over again about the same issues, and it can get quite dull. So if you can tell a story, whether you use an analogy or a metaphor to do that, I really like that kind of content. I think that works really well. But also, I think you've got to write in a positive manner. It's easy to highlight issues and go, this company got breached because of this, it could have been because of this, and focus on those negatives. But actually, sometimes, most companies are going to get breached at some point.
Yeah, keep in mind, Joe has published a fair amount of my creations, so I may be just slightly over that positivity bar in my writing.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's okay to be sometimes negative, but as long as there's a positive outcome at the end, I think that's kind of where I was leading to with that.
Do you feel, though, that in a lot of cases you're seeing in the industry the real descent into SEO optimized articles, almost approaching clickbaity, 5 things CEOs must know, and the third thing will really shock you?
Yeah. I mean, I think as an industry, we're pretty good with that. I don't see too much of that going on. I think one thing that I've experienced a lot, and I suspect many people in my sort of position have experienced it as well, is like sort of VPN, a lot of VPN companies, they'll come over and go, oh, we've got this great blog, it's amazing. It can be about whatever you want. Then halfway through the blog, it'll be like, and you also need to include, this best priced VPN solution. and then they hyperlink back to their blog. And, once you've been doing it a while, you can kind of pick up. I've had some strange blogs been sent to me where actually it's been really good content.
Right.
And they're not like massively known in the industry. And I always like to give everyone a chance, because I don't think you need to have 10,000 followers on Twitter to be a good writer or to have an opinion. I think anyone should have an opinion. But I've read stuff before, and then like halfway through, it'll kind of just say something really strange, like, and you need to spell check this and go into like do something with grammar, and then it links back to some sort of like free writing essay website. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, you're just trying to obviously get a backlink. So yeah. I think you do kind of see a lot of people from outside the industry trying to contribute and get backlinks. I also think you do get certain strategies where people think, yeah, we'll shock people in with headlines, and then you actually read it and then it's nothing to do with that, or it can be very funny or whatever. But I think it's a shame because those top five, those list blogs are actually really good and really interesting when done correctly. I just think people, they know it gets done well and it works for a lot of companies. It's a good strategy, so they kind of exploit it and just twist it and do something different, and then people read it and go, oh god, I can't believe I just read that. But yeah, I do see it quite a bit.
So kind of related to that, what are your thoughts on the kind of way companies approach new security findings or vulnerabilities, where there's a fancy website put out, a fancy name and logo and all of that being put out? And sometimes it is quite big, but other times it's just like, nah, not the end of the world. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, good question. I think it depends on each individual sort of situation. I think sometimes branding a vulnerability actually can be a good thing, because it gives, people aren't going to call it CV blah 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 blah. If they've got something to call it, like Blue Key, for example, everyone knows what that is. And then especially, as an industry, we can talk about it ourselves. But a lot of these people out there that maybe aren't active on social media, people want to refer back to these things as something, not just a number. So I think that is actually quite a good thing sometimes, to have that so everyone can recognize it. But on the flip side, I think sometimes people create it because they feel like they need to, and then they can blow it up and make a website and a fancy logo, and it's like, it's not really needed. It's not as big as an issue as you're trying to make out it is. So that's kind of where I stand on that.
Cool. Yeah. Certainly interesting. I've never really thought of it from the aspect of having a common name that you can speak to versus a CVE. So that's pretty interesting take on it.
Yeah, no, good. I appreciate that. And I think I'm very skeptical, because we publish a lot of content, so I have to check back on sources and things like that. So I am skeptical when I see these, data, these buckets that have been exposed and things like that. There's several people in the industry that kind of go after that, and I know there is a company that it almost seems like that's their strategy. They've got a couple of researchers, they'll find something that's exposed, and they just blast it out to the media. And then I always just stay away from stuff like that. I don't think it's the right way of doing things. I believe in responsible disclosure. I get all that. I think people need to be pushed to make a change sometimes. I totally agree with all that. But I think sometimes, again, it's similar to we were talking about before with the titles and 10 things you need to know, and number 3 will shock you. People see it as a strategy, and then they exploit it and do it differently. And then that can kind of give everyone else a bit of a bad name when they actually do something that's meaningful.
Do you think, though, that InfoSec journalism is in better shape today than, say, looking back 4 or 5 years ago? Or do you see that it's now, really a marketing strategy and not much else?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's changed quite a lot. I think obviously now, it's so easy just to get online and write something and get it published somewhere. You see websites coming up, you see these websites that are almost scraping content from other publications and passing it off as their own. And you see a lot of that. And I think that brings down a lot of credibility. And I do think a lot of people look at it as a marketing tool. But the sad thing is, I know if you look at the independent publications, you have things like your SC magazines, Infosecurity Europe and stuff like that. I mean, Infosecurity Europe is probably a little bit different because it has the confidence to back it up. Same with things like Dark Reading, it has a confidence to back it up as such. But SC magazine, like when I first started, had a massive team of writers, and now they can't. There's not a business model there for them, so they have to do webcasts, sponsored webcasts, and things like that. So it's really hard for these independent places to survive in an industry where we expect free content. So then that turns to the vendors, where they can actually afford, because they're selling products and solutions, to pay people to come in and write stuff. So then you get the ones that are kind of like pushing a certain narrative because it backs up their solutions and products. But then obviously there's the ones that are more independent too, that kind of have more of a neutral tone. So I think it has changed, and maybe sometimes for the better, but sometimes not for the better.
So I guess one of the major things that Tripwire has done is talk a little bit about your support via, I know at the last couple of conventions, you have these tokens, and I believe you allow folks to decide what charitable organizations to support.
Yeah, we've been doing that for a couple of years now. And
yeah,
think it got to the point where you kind of go to these conferences, and when you've done them, the first few times it's great. You go around and you pick up your socks and whatever it may be, your t-shirts. But after you've done it a couple of times, and now this obviously the industry's been going on quite a long time now, you see the same things, you see the same junk. You see people branded frisbees and things like that, and it's just people spend thousands of dollars on bringing that to an event, and then probably only half of it goes. So then it's not worth taking the rest back, so they throw it away or whatever they do. There's so much waste out there already, and we kind of thought, well, instead of doing more stuff like that, actually let's just invest that budget and give it to people that actually need it. And I think from our point of view, that's been really good, because we've had lots of good feedback from people saying it's great, that you are doing that and not just wasting marketing budget on gimmicky things. But I've also seen over the last couple of years, I think it's inspired other vendors to do it, which is great. If people are stealing the ideas, it's brilliant. It shows that what you're doing is good. And I think we were one of the first people to do that. So we were supporting like Girls Who Code, Women in Security, EFF, other organisations like that. So different ones in the UK to the US. And yeah, we've done it at Black Hat, RSA, into security. We're going to do it again at RSA. We're changing it a little bit this time, where it's going to be more interactive, but it's all donation based. I think last year we probably raised something around maybe $10,000 for 8 different organisations over 3 major events.
Lovely, yeah.
So it's good.
So where's Tripwire, the blog, and Tripwire, the company, going in 2020? What can you tell us about the secret plans for world domination?
Well, I can't tell you too much. It's
okay.
Obviously it's got to be a surprise. But no, I think we're going to we're looking to potentially launch a podcast. We did a podcast a long time ago, and people kind of left, and it didn't really get picked up by people, and it was very Tripwire centric, which is fine. People do want to listen to what Tripwire got to talk about, and we've got some great people internally. But I think we're going to maybe start a podcast early next year where it's going to be some internal people, but we're also going to go out to the community and get more people involved. We want to just not be another podcast like there's so many out there now, so we want to try and do it a little bit different. But that's going to be something we're looking to push out. Also, just more video content. I mean, that is kind of the way things are going. A lot more people are using YouTube as a search engine to find stuff. So, we want to put more content out there. Whether we're writing up, we've done quite a few recently. You know yourself, where we've asked questions to people in the industry. We've asked for video responses. They've done that. We've embedded them in a blog. We've written answers, and then we've distributed that out. And things like that have been working really well. So we want to do more of that. We want to do more independent videos as well, especially at events and things like that. So I think they'll I mean, apart from doing all the other stuff we do already, they'll probably be the 2 things we'll focus on in 2020.
Very exciting.
If you're looking for podcast guests, I think there's a fair palette of them that have been on our podcast over the past nearly a day.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I think that'll be the list we start with, to be honest. We'll just look at that and go through them one by one.
I think you could do worse, mate.
Yeah,
exactly. No, I think it's a good start. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem at all. Ian, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and sort of heap praises upon Joe and his continued support of the community and running an independent / sort of dependent publication with a voice of reason that gives new authors and old authors an opportunity to talk about the issues that are interesting to them. Joe, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I just have sort of one off the cuff. What do you read when you're not reading submissions to the Tripwire blog?
As in security wise, or just generally?
Anything. Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Well, I like sport, so I read a lot of sport, particularly football and things like that. So that kind of takes me away from the realms of security. But there are a lot of good blogs out there. I mean, you have your go-to ones. Obviously, things like the Register and Graham Cluley are great places to go to actually just kind of learn what's going on in the industry. There's a lot of researcher blogs out there as well. It's almost like there's so many good blogs and there's so much content out there. You can kind of pick and choose. And I mean, we find that with Tripwire, where we get some blogs that do really, really well. And I'm sure we have a pool of loyal readers, but I think people just dot around because there's so many different sites publishing so much content. I think there's so many great security blogs out there now.
Yeah, very, very cool. Well, we're going to say goodbye to Joe. Thank you so much, Joe. I mean,
just what you've done
and how you've contributed is really, really awesome.